What is the number one thing you take away from watching these 10 episodes over these last 5 weeks?
I think this just changed the landscape, Greeny, of how documentaries are actually going to be done. I mean, I don't know how you come back after something like this. And I saw a slew of comments like that last night on social media. It was just, Barack Obama describing Michael Jordan as just this largest cultural force that just has this momentum that is perpetual. It is relentless in its demeanor. And then also David Stern actually put this whole thing into perspective when he said, during that era for Michael Jordan, the NBA was in, 64, 70 countries. And after that era, the NBA was in 215 countries. So just the openness, the willingness for Michael Jordan to go there, to unveil himself, to show you who he was, to show you how his competitive nature reached to every cornerstone of the planet. I think it was one of the most just moving documentaries I think I've ever seen, ever.
Now, the impact off the floor, the impact on the floor. How about you, Timmy? What's the number one thing you will take away from watching this?
Well, I love the fact that it basically brought Michael Jordan's entire career to modern times and to a younger generation of players that, for the most part, know he's the greatest. He's considered the greatest. I'm sure they've all watched highlights or YouTube videos. This was different. This really made you feel like you were back living it again, watching it at the time. And for me, it just cements why he's considered the greatest of all time. And I looked at those early episodes and what he went through physically and the abuse that he took to finally get to the point where he was able to break through. I think it's a miracle when you watch some of that footage of what he went through against Detroit, what he went through against a team like the Knicks in the mid-'90s, that he at no point suffered a catastrophic injury early in his career. And he wasn't just, playing. He was playing 82 games a night, and you knew that he was coming at you, and the rules allowed, to a certain extent, that kind of physicality when you were up in the air and what he meant. And I think for me, it cemented why he's considered the greatest of all time, to be able to do what he did statistically and as a winner in an era that was designed to stop you with that level of physicality. For me, that's what stood out the most.
Do you think they would have won 7?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think there's a mitigating factor that would have really helped them be able to do that. Obviously, at the end of any run, there's going to be fatigue that sets in. There's just mental exhaustion as well as physical. And that's why typically these things break up, or interpersonal relationships cancel it out, whatever it may be. But think about what happened that following summer leading into the next season. You had the lockout, and the lockout basically would have given this team additional time to rest mentally, physically. You would have come back for a shorter season. And if anybody ever needed a shorter season, it's a team that would be going for their 4th straight title. And that's exactly what would have been the remedy. Now, look, San Antonio obviously won the championship in '99, and they were a great team. But the Knicks were a surprise finalist that year in the finals. So I think the path to a 7th certainly was there. And that would have been in place, which would have been exactly what they would have needed to make that happen. A shorter season, more motivation in a shorter period of time, and a lot of rest in the offseason from winning that 3rd straight title.
Yeah, for those who don't know, and it wasn't really covered in the documentary last night because it ends at the end of the '98 championship, but the lockout followed. It was a 50-game season, and as Tim Legler mentions, a New York Knicks team playing without Patrick Ewing wound up making the NBA Finals that season out of the Eastern Conference. So there's that side of it. And then, Jay Will, how about just psychologically hearing Jordan say he just can't accept the fact that he didn't get a chance to go back out there and try again?
Watching that last night, Greeny, after this whole thing was over, I also went back and I watched his Hall of Fame speech. And it just reminded me of how crazy competitive I became as a little kid by paying attention to all those little things that Michael Jordan did. The cup will always be half full. It will always be half full, and he will always find whatever ancillary content or whatever pieces or things that people say to motivate him. And I think, that dire desire to be the greatest at everything, even in his Hall of Fame speech, he's like, and people joke around, maybe I'll come back at 50. And people started laughing in the Hall of Fame speech. Greeny said, why are you guys laughing? Why are you guys laughing? Like, he was deadpan serious. And he's a guy who he believes fear is an illusion and that he can accomplish anything. And that mindset ultimately is what reached him to stratospheres that no one can ever imagine, because he was relentless in his approach and he believed he could be the best at whatever he put his mind to. That's the difference maker between Michael Jordan and everybody else.
There's a little part of me that says there's also something that adds to his mystique about the way that it ended. You know, Tim, we never saw that team lose. Again, you were playing in the league at the time and I was covering it. We never saw them get beat. And eventually, if they'd stayed together, someone would have beaten them. Someone eventually always does. There's something about it remaining perfect, about it ending with that hand in the air on that final shot as he followed through, as he described it, on that night where he scored 45 out of his team's 87 points to win his 6th championship. There's something about scripting the perfect ending that I think adds to the legend.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I think one of the other things that really stood out to me from this, if you want to sum up what Michael Jordan's all about, I was watching it and, you know, obviously he's got a lot of bravado. He's a very confident man in a lot of the things that he said. But for me, it points out the fact that people who really hate to lose typically don't do a lot of it in their lifetime. And I think Michael Jordan's obsession with not losing, I actually think he hated to lose more than he actually loved to win. I think winning for him was more of a relief, but it was that hatred of not being the best, of not finishing the season on top, is what drove him. And so for me, any year that he would have played, that would have been in Chicago, finishing off that run, I think they would have been the favorite to win it again because of that element of his psyche and personality.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.